The British Bristol Blenheim medium bomber emerged from the world's fastest commercial airliner of the 1930s, the Bristol Type 142. Configured for use by the Royal Air Force, the Blenheim spanned several variants, one of which was a night fighter bomber. Armed with either 3 Vickers or 3 Browning machine guns and a bomb load of over 1,000 pounds, the Blenheim proved especially reliable during the first years of World War II, thanks to its incredible speed of over 2,867 miles per hour. From the Battle of France to the heroic defense of Britain, the Blenheim was always ready to serve king and country until the Third Reich was eradicated. The fastest airliner. The period following the end of World War I became the testing ground for all sorts of aircraft-related experiments, with the 1930s seeing the rise of commercial aviation and giving civilians a new way to travel around the world. Consequently, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, France, Russia, Japan, and the United States invested in aircraft agencies willing to innovate on military and civilian fronts. During the early months of 1934, Harold Sidney Harmsworth, Lord Rothermere, challenged the entire British aviation industry to produce the fastest aircraft in all of Europe. As the owner of the Daily Mail, one of the most prestigious newspapers in the United Kingdom, Lord Rothermere envisioned a British-made high-speed aircraft that could carry up to 6 passengers and 2 crewmen. His objective was simple: to take over the rapidly growing commercial aviation industry in the continent, and possibly the globe. This ambitious goal came at a time when Germany and its aircraft industry were on the rise with dozens of innovative designs. One of the most groundbreaking German designs taking over the European market was the single-engine Heinkel HE-70. First flown in 1932, the Heinkel HE-70 Blitz, or Lightning, was a mail and passenger plane. By the time Lord Rothermere had come up with his idea, the Blitz had already set 8 world speed records, and he hoped to dethrone it with a British design. Moreover, Lord Rothermere believed that his request would encourage local businesses to use civilian and commercial aviation, and even proved to the Air Ministry that such designs would be no match for the current military aircraft employed by the Royal Air Force. Barnwell's Type 142. A year before Lord Rothermere made his request public, Scottish aeronautical engineer Frank Barnwell, Bristol's chief designer, visited the United States to collect information about the latest American air industry innovations. Upon returning to Britain, Barnwell discussed with Sir Roy Fedden the possibility of coming up with a British design similar to the Lockheed Electra 12A, employing the Bristol Aquila engine, which produced over 500 horsepower. Both men expected the prototype could reach a speed of up to 250 miles per hour, which was faster than the Hawker Fury 2 used by the Royal Air Force. These ideas materialized in the Type 135 design, which significantly resembled the Electra, except that it was fitted with the Aquila engine. Soon, Lord Rothermere became interested in the design and contacted Bristol. Frank Barnwell let him know that the estimated speed of the Type 135 was 250 miles per hour at an altitude of 6,500 feet, with the poppet valve Bristol Mercury engine. The prototype eventually evolved into the Type 142, which was practically funded by Lord Rothermere himself. In fact, he asked Bristol to build 2 prototypes for him at 18,500 British pounds each. Lord Rothermere's Type 142 flew for the first time in April of 1935 when it took off from Filton Aerodrome, South Gloucestershire. The aircraft surprised Bristol engineers when it reached a top speed of over 307 miles per hour, making it much faster than any aircraft the Royal Air Force had in service. The RAF officers then saw potential in the airliner as a medium bomber and were immediately interested in a military variant. In July of 1935, the Air Ministry requested Bristol to convert the Type 142 into a bomber aircraft. Specification B-2835. Specification B-2835 called for the creation of a medium bomber prototype dubbed Type 142M. The main difference with the airliner version was how the wings were repositioned to a mid-wing position. The change allowed the aircraft to increase its storage capacity in the bomb bay, while 2 Browning machine guns were also added. One was placed in the nose and another in the dorsal position. An order for 150 models was issued in 1935. The first Type 142M flew in June of 1936 and was formally introduced to the Royal Air Force fleet under the name Blenheim Mark I. The name honored the Battle of Blenheim from the War of the Spanish Succession. The pilots from Squadron 114 were the first to employ the Blenheim in March of 1937, while other Blenheims first arrived in India and other British colonial territories in early 1939, before World War II broke out. The Blenheim Mark I had a crew of 3, a pilot, a navigator bombardier, and a radio operator air gunner, and was powered by 2 Bristol Mercury 8 radial piston engines that produced 840 horsepower each. Its armament comprised 2 77mm Vickers K machine guns, one fixed to the port side wing and the other at a dorsal turret emplacement. Also, its bomb bay had a capacity of over 1,000 pounds. Over 1,550 units of the Mark I were produced before more variants were introduced into service. However, the overall design would remain mostly the same. The Blenheim's fuselage featured a light alloy monocoque structure that used open-section stringers. Both the fuselage and the wing were built in 3 sections, and the undercarriage was hydraulically retracted and featured medium-pressure tires. Overall, the aircraft had a length of 42 feet, a width of 56 feet, a height of 9.8 feet, and a weight of 9,811 pounds, with very little variation in dimensions. Blenheim variants see action over Europe. The development of the Blenheim Mark II grew out of the Royal Air Force's desire to develop a variant that had an extended range for reconnaissance missions. The sole prototype had a tankage capacity increase from 334 to over 562 gallons, but was ditched because the speed increase was marginal. After that, the Blenheim Mark III variant experimented with a stepless cockpit, giving the pilot a wider field of view and providing more room for the bombardier to aim. It also featured an upgraded Mercury 15 engine that delivered 905 horsepower. This led to the creation of the Mark IV variant, whose main difference was the replacement of the British Vickers MGs for American Browning machine guns. The Mark IV deliveries began in mid-1939, before Britain's war declaration against Germany in September. A lone squadron of Blenheim Mark IVs crossed into German airspace on September 3rd, after conducting a reconnaissance mission over the skies of Wilhelmshaven. A day later, a batch of 10 Mark IVs bombed Luftwaffe positions at the Elbe estuary, but only 5 returned to attack the enemy another day. The medium bombers were then deployed with the RAF Advanced Air Striking Force, or AASF, for bombing missions over France, Norway, Belgium, and other regions that fell under German and Italian control. In May of 1940, several Mark IVs took off from the UK to participate in the Battle of France to stop the Blitzkrieg advance of the Wehrmacht, but it was impossible to stop the German war machine. Most Blenheim squadrons were torn apart by Luftwaffe aircraft and failed to score considerable damage to the advancing German ground troops. There were more than 100 Blenheim losses in the span of 2 weeks. When the British Expeditionary Force was cornered at Dunkirk, the RAF was forced to send in every available Blenheim to help with the retreat. Some were Mark I variants that were only armed with 1 machine gun, and although most were lost in the fray, the British ultimately succeeded in Dunkirk. Fighter bomber roles. By mid-1942, it was evident that the Blenheim was being outmatched by several other aircraft, mainly the Bf-109, which limited its use to North Africa and the Far East. Then, with the introduction of the de Havilland Mosquito, the Blenheim was almost withdrawn from service. Even so, Bristol kept upgrading the Blenheim and eventually introduced the Mark 1F and 4F variants, which were used as long-range night fighters. These models were fitted with the Mark IV radar and served as both bombers and fighters. And although they were almost entirely relegated from the front lines, the upgraded Blenheims were often the rear guard of night bombing missions. Despite their limited armament, the Mark IVs employed by the Coastal Command during the Battle of Britain were crucial in keeping the German aircraft at bay. They were even more critical in the colonies, where the British had less air support in their fight against the Imperial Japanese Army. In early 1944, most Blenheims were retired from service and began to be used as trainers. However, several factories in Canada started to develop the Bristol Fairchild Bolingbroke light bomber and maritime patrol aircraft, which was based on the Blenheim Mark IV. The aircraft was employed by the Royal Canadian Air Force during the entirety of World War II, before it was turned into a trainer aircraft. Ultimately, more than 4,000 Blenheims were produced by Britain, Canada, Yugoslavia, and Finland, which retired the aircraft from service in 1956. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos. Stay tuned.